Okay. All right, we're going to be a cozy group. The focus of this session is men's civilian clothing, a la 1860. I do have some photographs along if we need to get into that. What I did bring for the most part was a lot of reproduction clothing based on our original patterns, things like that. And that's kind of what I'm going to show. We're going to talk about fabrics, style, economic class, because what you wear is dependent upon how much money you've got. They were talking in the umpiring session about the umpires tend to wear top hats, but they wouldn't necessarily have to. I mean, they can certainly wear them if that's economically what they would have, but I brought along some different hats to show, different styles, things like that. With that said, we'll get started. First thing to do would be the shirts, and I brought along a variety of shirts just for fabric. We have Loud and Proud, which is if you've got a lot of money and you want to show it. This is actually what is called a poor man's dress shirt. It's not a solid white one like this. This is a dress shirt. This is an expensive shirt for somebody who's got money. It costs a lot more money to bleach the cotton fibers white than it does to take them straight off of the cotton plant, which comes off in the natural. So to bleach this white and use all white for the shirt is very expensive. So somebody who doesn't have quite so much money, you put your pleated section here in the front for the style, but you make the rest of the shirt out of the cotton, something else that is not quite so fancy. So that's this. We refer to this as a poor man's dress shirt. When you've got this on and you've got a vest over it, what shows? The cuff shows, the placket shows. So it kind of disappears. And we'll talk vests in a little bit. You can also use, this is a pleated small bib shirt that we have verified time-wise. It has a very narrow bib on it. It's something that we've just started making. And I didn't know, we do a lot of these for the cowboys now, for the later 1880s, but it's also a very historically accurate pattern. They would use it and button the placket here, keeps the dust from coming in. So even as somebody was walking along the trail, like Oregon Trail, Santa Fe Trail, this certainly could be used, and it's a much easier one to do. This is also a very easy design to reproduce. It's one color on the off-white, so it's a very easy one to reproduce. You've also got pillow ticking. Very, very common fabric. Again, one color on the off-white. And you'll see it also in indigo or navy. Again, that's a common, a common piece. Very easy to produce. By the 1860s, you could print up to 20 colors of different colors on a piece of cotton. The first 10 do not add to the cost. The second 10 start adding incrementally to the cost. So again, depending on how much money you've got, you can have the fancier, louder, prouder fabric. But you're starting to move into the aniline dyes rather than just the natural dyes. So you've got some chemical dyes. The shades are changing a little bit. So you've got a little bit more variety. But it's designed to be, how much money do you have? A piece like this, which is just one color, is going to cost less than something than this. And you'll see some cottons, where you literally have 20 colors. If you got the money for it, you could have it. The old traditional, it's in the 1800s, it's only got to have 3 colors, it can't have more than 3 colors, is not accurate. It really does not work that way. It's how much money do you have. And one other style. This is the full bib style with a larger bib over the front. This originates with the New York and Boston fire departments because it's got the extra wool and extra placket on top. They're fighting fires, they're fighting sparks, things like that. More layers to go through. It was traditionally made of wool. Wool doesn't burn like cotton does. But as the shirt became more common, then it moves into the cotton. Questions on shirts?
Where were most of the shirts made?
If you had the money, you could have them tailored. The sewing machine is being used. Singer was selling the sewing machine door to door by 1850. So you do have factories that are producing the shirts, but it just depends on how much money you've got. It could be mom sitting at home doing it hand by hand. It just depends on what you can afford and where you're going.
So people bought the fabric in many colors or whatever color combination they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Mills sold them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the mills colored.
Yeah.
Natural cotton.
Yeah. Yeah. The cotton mill or the woolen mill, depending on what you're doing, because wool comes off the sheep kind of in an off-white too. And to bleach it white, you never really get wool white. Wool always stays with kind of an eggshell off-white. Cotton you can bleach to the white. The mills would do that in large quantities. Most of the printing up until about 1850 was done with copper drums, copper plates, and they would run the fabric through that cotton plate. And that would almost, if you remember the old mimeograph machines way back when, for those of us that are old enough, same process. You got a drum, and it's just going through making that design. Each color takes a run through the drum. So you got to do it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, different drums. You run it through one time. You run it through a second time on another drum, things like that. If you ever look at a piece of fabric, a piece of cotton today, in a quilt shop or like a Joann's, in the selvage, you'll see a series of colored dots. Each of those colors is one color on that fabric as it has gone through the printing process. And so if you count the number of circles in that selvage, that will tell you how many different colors are in that piece of fabric.
So Paisley would have went through it quite a few times?
Paisley would have probably gone through at least 4 or 5. Yeah. And Paisley goes all the way back into the 1600s, in the tapestries woven in England and Europe. So don't let anybody tell you that Paisley isn't proper.
What weight is the fabric commonly bought from the mills?
From the mills, this is an average weight of cotton. It's what we would today call quilting weight cotton, or mattress ticking, things like that, pillow ticking. It's just a good shirting weight cotton. If we're talking wools, the shirt weight wool was a 10-ounce flannel. So if you are reading something in the 1800s and it refers to a flannel weight, it probably means wool, and that would be a 10-ounce in today's terms. The pant weight cotton or the pant weight wool that we use today is a 16-ounce wool. And that's the weight per yard. 1 yard weighs 10 ounces, or 1 yard weighs 16 ounces. That's the common weight. A lot of the shirts, particularly the military shirts back then, or the fire department shirts, were wool, because wool doesn't burn. Cotton burns. So if you're going to be standing near the fire, or if you're fighting the fires, you need the wool, because it's much more flame retardant than the cotton is.
So all the military uniforms, both north and south,
Were wool. Yep. It didn't make any difference if you were, in Gettysburg or in Vicksburg or, down in Florida, and it was 102 in the shade, you're wearing wool. And people today go, ah! And it's like, that's what they did. They didn't know any better. I get people all the time who say, oh, I don't know how they stood it. They didn't know any better. That's what they had. That's what everybody had, so that's what you did. But yeah, clothing, proper good clothing was wool. And that's really where it went. So that, again, it's also more easily produced up here. Everybody could raise a sheep up here. You don't raise cotton up here until you get further south, maybe like into the boot heel or down south. So cotton was actually not as accessible up here as wool or silk. And by today's standards, that's different. But it's I've got a good friend. She always said she was going to make herself a work dress out of silk because that was more easily gotten than cotton. Cotton, calicos, almost the chintzes, all of that, a lot of it came from India, so it had to come by boat and then come up the river from New Orleans. It's available, but it's more expensive.
How are these shirts sized? The collars look like neck size is pretty big.
We tend to make them large for everybody. And when we make the shirts to go into our store inventory, we do it by actual inches of the chest. We've had to adapt them a little bit, for modern bodies. modern bodies are bigger than the guys back then. So if I set this down, I'm gonna take one of these shirts out, okay? I'll lay it right here. Hopefully that'll pick it up. The other thing is you'll notice that these things are cut on the square. If you've made modern shirts, the sleeves are inset and they're very tight through the arms. They're not back then. They hadn't figured out how to make fit more closely. That doesn't come until the late 70s, early 80s. So it literally is a rectangle of fabric. And then there is a gusset under here. See this extra piece of fabric where the stripes are going the other way? That's an extra piece that's put underneath the arm so that when you do this, it doesn't rip out. Otherwise it would rip. But it's very easy to sew for those of us who are seamstresses. Setting the sleeves in on a modern piece is, is ridiculous. This is one big long straight seam. This is easy to sew. But it's very, very straight. And this is a typical shirt of 1850s, 1860s.
That's 10-ounce cotton?
No, this is probably like 6 ounce. Can I feel it?
Oh, it's nice and light.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cotton is very light, yeah. This is probably 6 ounce. I mean, this is not heavy at all. If anybody else, wants to.
What is the pillow ticking weight?
Pillow ticking actually today is probably about 8 ounces. It's got an extra finish on it because this extra finish is put on now to keep the feathers inside, because pillow ticking is keeping the down feathers in. This is not. We've washed this enough, we got rid of the sizing. So it's back to about 6. It's a good quilting weight by today's standards. If you go into a fabric store or a quilt shop, you want to ask for a good 100% cotton quilting weight.
100% cotton?
100%
Is it
cotton.
going to shrink?
Yeah, oh yeah, it shrinks. Oh yeah. First thing you do is wash the fabric before you start sewing. And it will continue to shrink even after you wash it. Cold water wash and line dry, and there's nothing you could do to stop the cotton. If you get it anywhere near the dryer,
So you've made these shirts,
yes.
and when you sell them, the person that buys and washes the shirt, it's going to still shrink.
It's still going to shrink. There's nothing I can do to stop it. It's cotton.
Don't put it in the dryer.
My words are cold water wash, line dry, don't get it anywhere near heat. The other reason to not get it near the heat is we put wooden buttons on them, and if you put a wooden button in the dryer over and over and over, it dries the wood out and the buttons crack. So it's also destructive on the buttons. So that's. Questions on shirts?
Were there other materials besides wood used for buttons?
Yeah, anything that's natural. Mother of pearl from shells. There were numerous button factories along the Mississippi River, up in northern Missouri, southern Iowa, Fort Madison, Muscatine, Keokuk. You will see they had mountains and mountains of freshwater shells, all with circles out of them. That's where they were cutting the buttons. So if you see a mother of pearl button, that's actually a shell button. You could have glass buttons. You will see black glass or clear glass. You could also have crocheted buttons. Somebody literally sits and crochets almost like a French knot, and that becomes a button. Now, the other thing we didn't talk about, see that there's only 3 buttons down on the placket, 3 or 4, okay? How do you make the buttonholes in 1860? You'd make them by hand, because there is no button holder that's yet been developed. So buttonholes are very, very difficult to make. They're time consuming. And all the shirts, therefore, are pullover with only about 3 or 4 buttons, okay? Because it's a whole lot easier to do 3 or 4 buttonholes than it is to do 10 all the way down the front.
So that expects, that it also would cause for the shirt to be more expensive then if it had
Yes,
more buttons.
if
in
you
it.
got the money to pay a tailor, to sit there and do this, buttonholes are made of silk, and it's really, really fine detailed work. Guys will ask me, well, do you do hand-bound buttonholes? I said, yeah, I can do them. He said, well, same cost? I said, no, $10 a buttonhole. and that's my price to do hand-bound buttonholes. It's $10 a buttonhole, because you're looking at about 15, 20 minutes per buttonhole. Okay, and I'm not that good, but that's what it takes me. So, but that's another aspect of it. If you've got the money, you can pay to have anything done. If you can pay a seamstress, you can pay a tailor, it can be done. So, oh yeah.
Do they ever use metal buttons?
If they have the castings, yeah. Now, on the trouser buttons particularly, we have a paperback tin or we have cast pewter. And for trouser buttons, particularly on the suspenders, much stronger. Yeah, definitely. Shank buttons are okay. We use 2-hole, 4-hole, and shank buttons. All of those are period correct. Yeah.
What
Thank
does
you, Fred.
shank buttons mean?
They have that little.
It's got that loop on the back.
You don't sew through the button, you sew the little thing on the
sew
back
through
side
that
of
loop on the
it.
back. It's used a lot in military uniforms. The military button maker of the time was Waterbury, and they had stuff going back to 1803. So if you have anything, they're still producing buttons today on actual equipment in some cases, reproduction equipment in others. They're out of Connecticut.
It's Waterbury?
Waterbury.
Thank you.
Waterbury. Waterbury.
Thank you.
And so if something is marked Waterbury, it is historically accurate because they're guaranteeing it and putting their name on it. It's like buying a Colt reproduction gun. You've got the verification of that. One thing I did bring along, and if we're doing a little snazzy, we do have sleeve garters. Sleeves are full because of the nature of the sleeve. So if you need to keep them up, the gentleman had sleeve garters.
Where would they wear them?
Right here.
Above or below the elbow?
I would say below, or right at the elbow, because if you're above, then as you muscle your arm, it keeps flexing, and that makes it more difficult. And the other thing I've got laying here is suspenders. Trousers of the time do not have waist belts. They are all buttons on the waistband, and you need suspenders to hold them up. It's just, they don't go to waist belts until the late 1880s. They've got gun belts and military belts and things like that to hold. It's almost like a modern tool belt, on the outside, but it's not on the trouser itself.
Oh, those are too plain.
Too plain? No.
My goodness.
These are my husband's favorite. This is a typical pair, 1860, give or take, trousers. Okay?
They would wear that color.
Absolutely. But see how I've got buttons on the waistbands? This is where the suspenders go. You've got 2 on either side in the front, 1 on either side in the back. It's much higher. They ride much higher than modern trousers. It's a very high rise here in the back. This particular pair is a 1-piece back. There's no yoke in the back here. It just rides very high up into the small of the back. And then, again, because we don't have elastic, for the time, what we have here is a little half belt. And that's how you adjust, if it's been a good meal or a bad meal or whatever. Because we don't have any elastic per se. Button fly, no zippers. Okay? Levi 501's type of fly. This is stylish. It's not necessarily loud, but it's stylish.
Is that the same principle as the Amish?
No, they don't use buttons. I don't know I'll be honest, I don't know what the guys use on their trousers.
I think they pin them.
Yeah, I know the women pin. The women
Yeah, the
don't use
women
buttons.
pin, I don't know what the men
I would
use.
presume so. And they still wear the drop front, which would be an earlier style. They don't have a center fly. They have almost a broad fall like Mexican War. But because I actually have I get some of my items from an Amish supply house, and they do have studs, but it's not a button, and it's not at the center. It's literally the flap comes over here, and there's a button over here at each side, and you unbutton that, and the whole front drops down. For those who need something calmer, this is actually linen. This is a piece of linen, and linen makes trousers very, very well. And again, this is a plant-based fabric. If you've got it, you can use it.
How does that wear compared to cotton?
About the same. It's not bad. it breathes. Cotton, wool, and linen are all going to breathe. As long as you're doing 100%, it's going to breathe very well. It's when you start mixing in the polyesters and the nylons and things like that that it's, so 100% natural is always good.
So does that shrink too?
It can, yeah, yeah.
Price-wise, where does that fall between cotton and wool? Is it closer to cotton?
Back then, it would have been similar to cotton. Today, it's much more expensive. It's like silk today. Silk is much more expensive today, but back then it would have been, it would have been cheaper. So we know that they used linen because they found linen garments on the Arabia and the Bertrand. The Arabia sank in 56, the Bertrand sank in 65. What happened there is the animal-based items, the leathers, the wools, things like that, that's what survived. The plant-based garments, the cottons, the linens, did not survive as well. So we don't have as many of those that have come through, but we know that they were on there. We know from the manifest that they were on there. This is actually a linen-cotton blend. Linen thread one direction, cotton thread the other. So this will give you a little bit of style, but not screaming. And again, now you can see it a little bit better in the back. You can see that half belt. And that tightens it up right in the small of the back, so it gives the trousers fit.
Did that just give it more style, or did it give it more strength?
Both. Both, yeah.
When I was a teenager and had pants with that belt on the back, I thought, this is silly.
Yeah.
But it comes from a long history,
It
doesn't
comes from a very long history. Yeah, it really does. And then this one, only 2 colors, and it's a woven plaid. It's not printed. This is actually a woven. But you can, see the colors.
Does it come with a red nose?
It can, yeah. You got enough beer, or Templeton Rye, yeah, I could give you a red nose. Dale has taken to liking the louder, prouder trousers. Again, because the more he screams, the louder he gets, the more questions he gets. We have a good friend who likes he has a striped shirt, he has a striped pair of pants, and a paisley vest. And he wore that to one of the cowboy action shoots. And the guys looked at him, well, he's also a deputy sheriff. So after the match, he went in the period outfit down to the department to show them what he'd been doing. And the guys have been, man. Well, they now call him the Guatemalan pimp. Okay? Because that's about how loud it looks, but it's period correct. It's what you did. The more money you had, the more you displayed that success and wealth through the clothing. On yourself, in your family, that's how you showed that you've got money. So. Everybody knows the rule about suspenders to people outside the family, right? You don't show your suspenders to those outside the family because they're considered your underwear.
Kind of like a bra strap?
Yeah, kind of very much like a bra strap, okay? The other reason is the gentlemen did not wear drawers or underwear for cleanliness' sake. They wore it for warmth, but not for hygienic purposes. Your shirt tails went down over your butt and took care of nature that way as well. So your suspenders are hiding what was basically your underwear and necessaries. So good etiquette demanded or prescribed that you don't show your suspenders to those outside the family. So gentlemen are always going to have either a vest or a coat when you're outside in public. And that's just, it's not hard and fast. If you're a farmer out in the field, who cares? But if you're in a public situation where they could be, where you be presented to women, you should have a vest on, or a vest or a coat. This one is a brocade. This one is just a nice, it's calm, but it's, it's got some style to it. This one, sedate. This is actually a wool silk blend, believe it or not. And it's got some, again, it's got some style. Actually, this has been very popular. My Irish guys buy this one. They like the green. And my heavy set guys like the vertical stripes. Moderate range. This is just a working vest. Nothing fancy at all. This is just, just working. This is cotton. Nothing fancy, nothing ornate. This is an everyday vest.
Would a person with that kind of vest have a pocket watch?
That's the only thing you would have for a timepiece, because that's all they had back then was pocket watches.
But someone that wore that
Yeah.
moderately priced vest?
It would have been a moderately priced pocket watch too. It would not be super fancy. It wouldn't be gold. It wouldn't be highly engraved. It wouldn't have a lot of jewels. It would be a bare bones pocket watch. Yeah. And then this one is a brushed cotton with a nice paisley. This is probably, of the ones I brought along, this is probably the highest elevation of cost and economics. And this is woven again. This is almost like a tapestry. And as we get done going through things, if you want to come up and take a look at anything, in detail, by all means. I didn't bring along any frock coats because I didn't have any to bring along, unfortunately. This is a sack coat. This is the equivalent of a modern suit coat. Very loose, very boxy. It's called a sack for a reason, because it fits like a sack. When it fits through the shoulders and upper chest, it's very, very large through the belly. It's just the nature of it. This one, again, this is a wool silk blend. Very light compared to some of these others. Like I've got a wool one here. Very light, but very, very historically correct. This one is wool. This one actually is a cotton. Now these, your sack coats can also be solid color. They can be linen. They can be wool. If you're going to do it out of cotton, it has to be a decent weight of cotton to make it work. So
you mentioned suit coat. This is like a suit coat.
this is like an everyday suit coat, yeah.
But it wouldn't match the pants necessarily, would it?
It would hopefully not match the pants. How many of you guys have seen the movie Gangs of New York? Okay, you've got every strata of economic level in that movie. You've got the Irish immigrants coming off with a boat. You've got a poor bank teller in that movie who has all three pieces: coat, vest, and pants, all the same fabric, because he's a dirt scrap poor bank teller. You've also got the butcher, the sheriff, coming up, more economically successful, and they're starting to have loud and proud. They're having more equipment, more colors, things like that. And then when you get really, really wealthy in the Vanderbilts and the Astors up on Fifth Avenue, well, then you're into the white tie and tails. They're very, very expensive. But now the Gangs of New York, if you have all the pieces all the same, it means you ain't got any other money. Basically what it means. Questions on this so far? Oh, we're in good shape. This was the best way I could come up with to display the hats. We were talking in the umpiring session before. A lot of the umpires wear the top hat. This is the typical style of top hat. 1850s, 1860s. We're not talking Lincoln stovepipe. We're talking a little bit of flare. We're talking a nice curve. These are out of pressed wool felt because that's what economically sells these days. What they would have been back then is a beaver felt. That's where the beaver industry, that's what they did. And the more beaver you had in the felt, the more expensive the hat. So if you've got the money, that's what you would have gone to. But this is the typical best hat. This is the most money hat. This is a little bit of a compromise. It's not a top hat, but it's not a bowler or derby. This is referred to today as a John Bull. It's a very British style hat. It's got the curve like it was going to go into a top hat, but it's not as tall. So this gives you style without the cost. That's another John Bull. This is what's referred to as a bowler. It's got a broader brim, but it's a civilian hat. It's not anything super expensive, but it's just an everyday hat. It could be a like shopkeeper. It might be the best hat of a farmer or a poorer city person, or an everyday hat for a business person, shopkeeper, dentist, doctor. Everyday type hat. Dentist, doctor, undertaker. For good hats, they're going to go into the top hat. But for everyday wear, could certainly be in the other one. Oops. This one is a little bit of a compromise again. This is called a tall bowler or a tall derby. See how it goes taller, but that's still rounded. Again, a little bit stylish, not too bad. This one has just a little bit of a different shape than the black one that I showed. Notice how the sides curve up quicker. It's not as broad in the curve. It's a little more rounded. Bowlers and derbies are very close when you look at them. If I order 2 bowlers and 2 derbies and they come in the same box, it's like, okay, which one's which? They're very difficult to discern. They both have rounded crowns. They both have curved sides. This one happens to have come in with a much more slanted brim. See how it kind of points to the front? That just happened to be the way that one came. That's an individual preference. That's not anything that's prescribed by design, by fashion, by etiquette or anything like that. That's just personal preference. This is a range of typical civilian hats. Like I said, these are a pressed felt, so they are shapeable, they are steamable, but they're not outrageously expensive. If you've ever bought a good Stetson hat, a real good cowboy hat, or Resistol, a Stetson, you'll see X's on the inside. You'll see 3X, you'll see 5X, you'll see 10X. That refers to the percentage of beaver in that hat. The Stetson, the 10X, is the highest percentage that they're still producing, and it's the most expensive. A 5X is very, very good. A 3X is, hey, it's got beaver in it. It's at least got something in it. No X's on a Stetson or a Resistol means it's all felt, just like these are. So it's a little different there. I've got a good friend who does a Lincoln impression, and to get a proper tall Lincoln, stovepipe hat, he has to go to Canada to get the real beaver satin mix, and he pays $300 a hat. Which that's what he's got to do now to get a true, accurate reproduction of a Lincoln hat. Yes, sir.
My top hat has perspiration marks on it.
Yep. Yep.
How do I get rid of that, or should I? Or what should I do?
I don't have any good way. You've got the white lines, the white sweat lines. I don't know of any way to get rid of it. You might check with a proper cowboy hat dealer. They may have an idea, but there's nothing you can do. I mean, we sweat, we perspire, and there's salt in that perspiration, and it's the salt that makes makes the marks in the hat. There's nothing we can do about it. All right, it's.
Some of its shape too. How do I get it redefined?
Now that you can do, that if you can take it, again, to a good hat dealer today, like somebody who's selling good Stetsons, Resistals, things like that, that you can do. You're going to have it steamed out. They will put it over a steamer, like a tea kettle or a steamer, and then that loosens up the wool, and they will reshape it, and as it dries, it will hold the new shape. That it can be done. Any of the good Civil War hat makers. Tim Bender out of Pennsylvania was one. I'm not sure who else is still around, but they do have the steaming machines. I know another one, Clearwater Hat out of Arkansas. Kay can do it too. When she is in the field, anybody who has a Clearwater hat can take it into her tent, and she will re-steam and reshape. That's a very easy process. You just put it over the steamer, loosen it up, and then shape it how you want it. Or if you have a hat that you don't like the shape and you want to change it, like a cowboy hat or a straw hat, same process. Put it over the steam, soften it up, warm it up, and then take it off of the steam, and it will hold as it dries and cools. It will hold that shape. That I know how to fix. I can't do it. I'm not good at it, but I know how to do it. So. It's the same as blocking a hat. Yeah, same process. Yeah.
I've seen those tall hats that had a hole right in the middle of the top. It is that.
I'll be honest, I don't know. I'd have to go look it up. I do not know. He's asking about a hole in the top of the hat. Only thing I can think of is that's how maybe they've shaped it and dried it when they were making it. I don't know. That's I could check with the Arabia and the Bertrand and see if they have anything like that. What survived a lot for the Arabia and the Bertrand were the hats, because again it was the beaver felt and the animal fibers. We've got wool and you've got beaver. They survived. The leather shoes, the leather boots, the wool coats, those survived. The cotton shirts, the linen shirts, the cotton dresses, that's what deteriorated in the ground. So, questions on the hats otherwise? And as she does this and gets this all, hey, she's going to do it. I did bring along just examples of patterns. This happens to be all of one line, but this is a good basic shirt pattern. It includes everyday and dress styles with gussets. I have another one from Past Patterns that also has gussets. For 1860s, you would still want to have a gusseted shirt. They hadn't moved away from the gussets yet.
When did they start cutting in
Late 70s is when they started insetting the sleeves and doing away from the gussets. This is probably the most economical vest pattern that I've got, because it has all 4 variations. It also has all sizes, but it gives you a wide variety of what you can do in one pattern. And it's got very, very good directions. See, I'm not the only one that likes loud and proud trousers. That's the reason I bring this one. See? Yeah. And this one also does have knickers. If anybody is ever interested in knickers, it has the knickers pattern too. But again, it has, you can see on the back if you can, and you're welcome to come up and take a look, it has the one-piece back. And it fits very well. Again, multiple sizing. And this is an example of the frock coat. The frock coat is longer, more fitted, and more expensive than the sack coats. But it's a formal, it's a more formal style. It would be the undertaker, the doctor, Sunday best for somebody who's kind of middle class, things like that. But it's not an everyday type of garment unless you are the undertaker, the doctor, or the politician. But all of these patterns are 1850s, 1860s. That's what I brought along. Questions? Other questions that we haven't addressed that you wanted to talk about? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What exactly would they use for support wear?
Corset. The question is, what would a lady wear for support wear if she's playing? And it's called a corset. That's the only thing that they've got back then.
I mean, what do they use? Because I'm sure whalebone
Yeah, obviously, what they would have used back then is the whalebone, which is forbidden, not available. We have steel boning pieces that most of the ladies use now to do the corset. I've got 1/4-inch ones and I've got 1/2-inch ones, and depending on how, gentlemen, you're not going to hear this, how large we are here compared to the rest of us, okay, in other words, how big the bust is. Sometimes you need the 1/2-inch, for more support to keep everything. You're going to look for a corset that hits you just about mid-bust. By the 1860s, they are coming down over the hip, again, for more support. And it's rows of boning. It's just upright rows of boning. It's going to hook up the front with a metal busk that hooks together and then lace up the back. But that is the only support garment that women have until the 20th century. I mean, that's it. The bra doesn't come in until after World War I. It's the 1920s. And the bra was invented by a graduate of Iowa State University, of which my husband graduated. Thank you very much. That's your trivia for the day. But yeah, it's a corset. I mean, and you can tell. I mean, my husband has gotten to the point now where he looks at a woman, she's not wearing a corset, because it's a very distinct physique. It's a very distinct silhouette that the corset will give you. To have clothing from the 1860s fit properly, look properly, you got to have a corset. Now, did they all wear them? There are corsets that are not done with stays or whalebone. It's all stitching. That's called an everyday or a work corset, and we do have patterns for those. They've even got straps over the shoulders. I mean, it's a working corset, but that's a more everyday type of garment. It would depend on the size of the girl, I'll be honest with you. It's probably more durable. It doesn't have the steel. I mean, in a proper corset, you can't bend at the waist. You have to bend at the hips. Whereas if it's all stitching, you've got more flexibility. You've also got the shoulder supports that it's not going to ride up or down as easily. The best pattern I know of who's doing, it's a working or gestation corset, believe it or not. Past Patterns has that. If you can go out to my website and take a look at it, or you can go out to Past Patterns website and see it. But it's a working corset. That's what it is. It's for somebody, if mom's at home and she's got the kids, she isn't going to go into, the fuss of it. But she's still got to have something to hold herself together. So. Other questions? I thank you. We're a small group, but I think we're an enjoyable group. Thank you very much.